All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Gen Chem Fundamentals series presented by MCAT Genie. So in this video, what I came to introduce was the idea of moles, which you may have heard of if you've taken Gen Chem 1. But in the end of the day, the key to understanding moles is to be able to picture different sizes of pizza. So I know that sounds crazy, but I will give you an example. So we're not talking about moles in the context of the blind, furry things that dig underground, but more so we are dealing with the concept that Avogadro helped us understand. So in any 1 mole of a substance, you can expect to find 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms or molecules per mole of that substance. So what do we mean by atoms or molecules? So just to make it clear, if I was dealing with the atoms of hydrogen and I said there is 1 mole of hydrogen atoms, then that would be 6.02 times 10 to the 23 hydrogen atoms. But if I was to talk to you about hydrogen gas, well, in the case of hydrogen, it happens to be a diatomic molecule. This would represent 6.02 times 10 to the 23 molecules in 1 mole of H2, which would technically be twice as many atoms. So that would be 12.04 times 10 to the 23 or 1.204 times 10 to the 24, whatever you want to call it. So let's keep it simple. If we're talking about something that is monatomic, the number of atoms, then we might just refer to the number of atoms. If we're talking about a molecule like H2 or even H2O, so on and so forth, that might be the number of molecules depending on how it's stated. So that's the first thing you need to be clear on. So the purpose of a mole is that it's supposed to represent a quantity. And why do we use them? What's the need? If we have mass, what's the point of using moles? So I want you to think about different sizes of pizza, like a small pizza. Let's say this is 8 inches, obviously not drawn to scale. Kind of a small pizza. I wouldn't be happy with that. Then let's say 12-inch pizza, which is going to be slightly larger than that, better size for a personal. And then let's say we have a 16-inch pizza, which in some places is called a large. So if I was to ask you, okay, the pizzas are typically going to have how many slices? Well, I'm from New York, so they usually have 8 slices, but let's assume that each of these pizzas has 8 slices. So if that's the case, and then I say, hey, go and grab me 2 slices from the 8-inch pie, then you know that that's going to be 1/4 or 2/8, right, of that pizza. Whether it's 8 inches or you grab 2 slices of the 12-inch pizza, that's still 1/4. Or if you grab 2 slices of the 16-inch pizza, it's still 1/4 of the pizza, of the whole. So realistically, that would be 0.25 moles for each of those pizzas if you were to grab 2 slices. But as we know, the molar mass of each of these pizzas is going to be different. And that is very logical because, well, they're different sizes of pizza. And so if I know that there are 2 slices of the 16-inch pizza, I also know that that is going to have a larger mass than 2 slices of the 8-inch pizza. So I'll remove the pizza analogy for a second, but it's actually very useful for understanding moles. So if I was to ask, okay, I'll use carbon as an example. Here's 24 grams of carbon. So we're going to take the mass of carbon and we're going to figure out how many moles that is of carbon. So in that case, what do we need to know to be able to achieve this? Well, I drew out this triangle for a reason. So mass is in grams, moles will be in moles, and molar mass will be, maybe you guessed it, grams per mole. So I have grams and I want to get to moles. If anyone can think about what I would need to get to that point, that would be helpful. You're going to need grams per mole. And what am I going to do with grams per mole? So I want to stress this as an intuitive way of thinking about this because I'm all for intuition. I'm all for things that just practically makes sense rather than memorizing, oh, do I need to multiply? Oh, do I need to divide? Why don't we just think about the situation? So I'll tell you right now that the molar mass of carbon is going to be 12 grams per mole. So now that you know that, that would mean that the pizza of carbon, which is 1 mole, which is 6.02 times 10 to the 23, will have a mass of 12 grams. If that's the case, and I say, well, here's 24 grams of carbon, how many moles is that going to be? Some of you might already know that that's 2. But if you were to figure this out mathematically, how do we make sure we do this correctly? So just as a reminder, we're trying to end up with moles, and moles is in the denominator of my molar mass. So if I want that unit to go to the top, then the easiest way for me to do this would be to take the mass of 24 grams and divide it by 12 grams per mole. You may see this in different ways. In typical dimensional analysis, it'll be 24 grams of carbon, and then you'll multiply that by 1 mole over 12 grams, and then you'll figure it out. And you can do that. But to me, that is just a longer way of getting to the point, which is we need to divide these numbers. And if I divide grams by grams per mole, then I'm essentially going to be multiplying by moles per gram because you multiply by the inverse. This is just a mathematical rule with fractions, even if the fraction is in the units. So anyways, long story short, I gave you 24 grams of carbon. You know it's 12 grams per mole, aka per pizza. How many pizzas do you got? Well, if I told you you have 16 slices, then you know you got 2 pizzas, assuming there's 8 slices per pizza. So it's really simple. When you need to change and convert between them, you just have to pay attention to the units so you do it appropriately, and the grams will cancel out, and this will come up, and this will tell us that that is 2 moles of carbon. Easy enough. All right. So we'll do a different variation of this, and we will start with moles instead. So if I was to say how much would 0.25 moles of carbon, how much would that be in mass? Then we're going to use the molar mass again because in our triangle we would need at least 2 of the 3 of these to find the other one. So if I can use the molar mass of carbon, which was 12 grams per mole if you remember, then I will simply take that molar mass and then what should I do with it? My goal is to get grams, and the molar mass has moles in the denominator. So I think it would be best if we multiplied by the number of moles that were given to us, and the moles will cancel out, which will leave us with grams, and our answer will be 12 times 0.25. Now, when you're doing the MCAT, you don't have a calculator, so it's good to get used to changing between common decimals and fractions, which 0.25 is the same thing as 1/4. So I'm essentially going to be taking 12 and multiplying by 1/4, which is the same thing as taking 12 and dividing by 4, which is going to give us 3 grams. So 0.25 moles of carbon, knowing that it's 12 grams per mole of carbon, is going to give us 3 grams. So I hope that this was helpful in terms of giving a brief review and an overview about how to do calculations with moles and how to convert between them. The main goal of this video was really to think about this conceptually, so that way you know how to convert between the units, how to find the one piece of this triangle that you don't have, and how to understand what moles are supposed to represent.